up guys, I'm Alex and welcome to another episode of the Filmmaking and Cinematography Podcast. Today we're diving into tips on how to create a cinematic set anywhere. Whether you're working with a high-end camera or just simply taking your shots with the phone, these techniques will elevate your filmmaking game. So let's get started. At first, one of the key elements to achieving a cinematic look is understanding and utilizing the 3-point lighting structure. This technique involves 3 lights, as the name says. The key light, which is the main light, the fill light, and the backlight. As said, the key light is your main lighting source and it should be the brightest. Normally you should position it at 45 degrees angle to the subject to create shadows and add dimensions to the face. Of course, this rule can be always overwritten, but this is, let's call it, the default way. The fill light, as the name suggests, fills in the shadows created by the key light. It is normally positioned opposite to the key light and usually is softer and less intense. It can also fill in light in the whole room, just to help the backlight. The backlight is also known as the rim or headlight, and this light is placed back. Yeah, as the name suggests, it's pretty easy. This light is placed behind the subject to separate them from the background. It adds depth and makes your subject stand out. Another crucial tip is to light your subject and the background differently. Again, the same thing to create depth. And here's how to do it. For lighting the subject, you need to focus on making the subject the brightest part of the frame. Use the key light to highlight their features and use the fill light to soften the shadows created by the key light. But lighting the background is a whole other story. Use practical lights like lamps or LEDs to illuminate the background. This creates separations between the subject and the background, adding layers to your shot. You can also use colored lights to add mood and tone to the scene. A very interesting way of lighting is with layers. Always consider a bright layer the brighter part of your image, and the dark layers, simple, very easy, the dark parts of your image. Let's say your subject, half of your subject, if you're putting the light at 45 degrees, so the part that is facing the light, that's the bright layer. And the dark layer is the other part, the shadow part of the face. You should never position a bright layer next to a bright layer. Always there should be a bright layer next to a dark layer. And this always creates a very cinematic shot. You can have, for example, another bright layer just in the background, which will be a practical light, but that practical light is a bright layer inside the dark layer of the background. As next, let's talk about using windows. Windows can be both a blessing and a curse in filmmaking. Natural light from windows can create beautiful, soft illumination, but it can also be unpredictable. Here are some tips how you can use the windows for your best interest, or maybe just cover them effectively. So when it comes to using windows, you use these windows as a key light. So position your subject to face the windows for soft, even lighting. This means just placing your subject at 45 degrees from the window, again creating the same natural shadow. But the window can also work as a very cool backlight, because it's far more powerful than any light that you might have, and this again creates a very cinematic shot. Of course, make sure to not create a silhouette of your subject, if that's not the case for your movie. So add a powerful enough fill light to counteract those shadows. Also, if the natural light is too harsh or inconsistent, cover the windows with blackout curtains or thick drapers. This allows you to control the light completely. You can then introduce your own lighting setup for a consistent result. Now that we covered the basics of lighting, let's talk about some more advanced techniques to make your set look even more cinematic. Match the color temperature of your lights to avoid color inconsistency, and use gels or color correcting filters to balance different lighting sources. Also, a very useful tip if you're short on a budget for lights is to use your shutter speed. One of my favorite way to light up a cinematic shot is in the teal and orange look. For that one you need a yellowish and tungsten lighting source together with a very bluish tone. And a very easy way to do this is using the white balance. For this you either need a blue LED and a white LED light, or just a very good tungsten light, a tungsten bulb or so, together with a white light. If you have a white light and want to make it blue, you just turn your shutter speed towards the bluish way. Then so that the tungsten still looks yellowish, but also you will achieve a blue light. And the same things happens again and the same goes for the other way around. Just turn that white light into some yellowish, turning your white balance towards the yellowish side, but still let the blue light be a bit bluish. Also, soft lighting is key to achieving a cinematic look. You could use diffusion materials like softboxes, umbrellas, or even the most basic things like a white sheet to soften the light and reduce harsh shadows. When I was just started out, I was simply just throwing a white t-shirt over some LED bulb that I was finding around, and I achieved a DIY softbox. Also, practical lights can be very good to achieve a cinematic shot, as said with the layers, but you could also incorporate practical lights like lamp or candles into your scenes. They add a natural feeling and can enhance the mood of your set. Of course, this should only happen if necessary, but with practical lights you can play around regarding your genre of the movie. If you have just a normal genre, some drama or something like this, then depending on the scene you could use various practical lights. But on the sci-fi genre or horror, there's a whole other story. You can add practical lights everywhere, and that makes everything more supernatural, because the viewer will ask themselves where does that light come from. So it lets you play around with various lighting sources. Finally, don't forget the importance of composition and camera movement. A well-lit set will look even more cinematic with thoughtful framing and smooth camera moves. Use the rule of thirds to position your subject. This creates a balanced and aesthetically pleasing shot. Pay attention to the background and avoid clutter that can distract from your subject. Smooth camera movements add a professional touch to your shot. Use tools like gimbals or sliders for stable and dynamic footage. Even handheld shots can look great with practice and attention to stability, but this always depends on your genre. A horror-ish shot will always look better handheld. And to wrap up today's episode on creating a cinematic set anywhere, remember, great lighting and thoughtful compositions are key to making your scenes look professional, no matter what camera you're using. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you for tuning in to the Filmmaking and Cinematography Podcast. I really hope that you found these tips helpful. Keep experimenting and stay creative. To see you next time.